sustainability, and community. Those are the three kind of pillars for how we're going to view having the most robust business that we can have. From a sustainability perspective, that all ladders up to three what we call aspirational goals. These were set out and articulated in 2005. And so when you look at any of the public commitments or the work that we have going on, it ladders up to one of these three areas. Either we want to be supplied by 100% renewable energy, create zero waste, or sell products that sustain people and the environment. They are broad, but what I would call your attention to is the reason that they're broad is for two different perspectives. One is that we want to be on a journey. This is a part of our company culture. This is exactly what we view as part of our role in society. We want to make sure that instead of just reaching a goal and being able to say, hey, we're done with it, these are things that are intended to be ingrained in what we do day in and day out as a part of our day-to-day business. The second piece to why these goals are so broad for the company is because they're meant to enlist the help of everybody. Whether you're someone who's gathering carts in a parking lot, so you're also picking up waste and getting that into a recycle bin or getting it disposed of in the proper way, or whether you're the CEO and you're setting direction for the whole company in terms of strategy and how that takes place. So as it starts to relate then to food, if you want to break it down then to the sustainable food discussion, our food pillars are really broken into 5 key areas. We're working on key commodities, so we want to sustainably source by 2025 20 key commodities around the world. We're working on animal, ag, and seafood. Lots of issues there that differ from other value chains, and so we have a specific emphasis on those two. Looking at produce and how that's sourced. Forests, which we saw some of the maps earlier. We have some tools that I'll talk about in a few minutes that help us understand what are the key issues and what's the role that we need to be playing. And then specialty crops and row crops, which again, key product areas for us in terms of a company. And so therefore, from a sustainability perspective, we have key programs that we have underway that are addressing exactly those issues. So to bring that to life, that's all great to be able to think about that at a high level strategically, kind of build out a framework. But how does that actually look inside of Walmart, and how do we work with people in the value chain in order to have more sustainable production and be able to have food and other commodities that are at a reasonable cost that we can provide to customers at a solid price? The first example I would bring up is what we call the Sustainability Index. So with all these, it goes without saying, we've worked with nonprofits, we've worked with academics, we've worked with suppliers. In some cases, we've actually worked with other retailers as well in the US and around the world to stand up various programs. What you see here is an example of what we call the Sustainability Index. What it does is it breaks down each category that we sell, and then what we do is we ask 15 questions around key hotspots within each value chain. An example here is in grapes. We've used this in grapes with our suppliers, particularly in Chile and Peru, where we look at issues around yield, we look at issues around water, we look at issues around emissions, and try to understand what are the drivers of cost, what are the drivers of inefficiency, and try to understand not only what are those topics, but what are suppliers doing to improve on those. So this is a survey that goes out every year, and it's meant to look at improving the baseline of all suppliers. So are they prioritizing the right issues? Are they making progress against those? Are interventions being put in place to be able to improve the products and how they're manufactured or brought to market? In a more targeted sense, that's a broad level tool. In a more targeted sense, we've worked with a number of different stakeholders to stand up what's called Global Forest Watch. So it's a tool you can go on if you look up Global Forest Watch on the internet right now. There's a number of tools out there, interactive maps that you can look at anything from forest change to land cover, land use. You can break it down by different crop types. So palm oil, you can look at soy, you can look at beef. You can look at anywhere globally in the world, and it's near real time what's happening with deforestation. Those topics are going to vary based on whether you're talking about the beef supply chain or the soy supply chain. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. The drivers in each one of those areas is different. Without a tool like this, we aren't able to have that specific conversation with suppliers. We aren't able to work with the right governments or the right NGOs to come up with the right interventions, understand what is the actual work that needs to happen to improve the sustainability of the supply chain. A great example, too, when you look at the topics that are being discussed at the G20 is something that we've been working on for the last several years called the Midwest Row Crop Collaborative. That's an effort in the United States where we're looking at the use of technologies to map specific farmer land. So it's down to the square foot type of level where we're looking at what is the type of soil, what is the crop being grown, what are the weather patterns, It helps then inform through a series of tools farmers. So information goes directly to the farmers to understand how much fertilizer to apply, what type of fertilizer, when to apply it. All this ends up meaning that you're going to end up having healthier soil, you're going to end up having better crops, better yields, which means more for the farmer. It also means that you're going to have less runoff of chemicals, and it means that you're going to have healthier waterways. So there's a number of different benefits that are going to come from this, and I think, again, these are tools, these are processes that are not only applicable in the US, but they're applicable elsewhere. And you can see each one of these different tools is very different in its approach, and I think that's the thing, is we're going to look at each one of the value chains, and we're going to try to understand where is the key issue, and then what is the intervention that could be put in place, working with different supply partners to be able to have the beneficial impact that we want. In a more granular sense, I would call out some of the work that we've been doing in Central America, where we've been taking a lot of these tools, working with specific farmers, farmer-producer organizations, and actually getting them directly sourced into our business. When you look at the work in Central America, that education and those programs have benefited the actual farmers by increasing yields. They've gotten higher prices for their crops. They get direct source into Walmart Central America. In this example, in 2015, over 69% of the actual grains and produce that were sold in those stores were directly sourced from farmers in that particular area, in that particular store region. And that ended up being about $124 million in that 1 year alone of sourcing from those local farmers. We're excited about those programs because that's real benefit going into that local community. And as it was mentioned a few minutes ago, it is about being able to be a part of the community and having a sound community to be able to have as your supply base and as your customer. That looks very similar to the work that we started to have underway here recently in India, an announcement that was made a few weeks ago that you may have seen, where our philanthropic side of the business, the Walmart Foundation, has dedicated $25 million over 5 years to work with the FPOs and being able to have a transfer of some of that knowledge. Things like, what is the spec that would be useful inside of a Walmart facility, a best price facility? What is it that we're looking for from a global sourcing perspective? Those types of issues, those type of topics, and then the transfer of technology and the transfer of processes and efficiencies to reduce waste and be able to have more that comes through the value chain and is able to be sold in the store, and then be able to then have less waste inside the retail facility. And then obviously the same kind of thing working here, a commitment to source up to 25% in the next several years into our actual operations is a way to translate that specifically into the work that we do. So hopefully I've given a little bit of a view into kind of how we view these topics, why they mean so much to the company, how we're working globally, give you a little bit of a view of how that looks at anywhere from a developing country all the way down through to more developing markets, working with local suppliers, making sure that they're robust and that they have viable tools and processes, and then we act as a good partner.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred. First, finishing a little even earlier than your allotted time, but it's a music to hear that 100% renewable energy and zero waste. And globally, if we can reduce, as I said, 1/3 of the food that is produced on this planet never reaches the stomachs. If we can reduce that wastage by 1/4 only, we can feed 800 million hungry people on this planet. So I commend your zero waste policy. We would love to see how you are going to implement that in India. Now, I have a question which you can respond later, and a challenge to you before I request Ritika. You know, in India, the big debate that we had when there was discussion in 2007, 8, 9, the big multi-brand stores need to come or not, the big box versus the mom and pop stores. You talked about that you're going to work with partners. Now, partners in your supply line, do you have any thought on what your partners could be in the distribution line also? Could you be franchising the mom and pop stores also to come up and join the Walmart in the distribution end? Could there be a Ashok Gulati Walmart shop? Could there be a Rajat Kathuria Walmart shop? Or any? so that the standards are set. It's a franchisee type of a model. Why I'm saying this clash, which people feel that the mom and pop stores' livelihood is being taken away by these big box stores, we need the real innovation is to build a model where the two can work each other, and how you can reach in every street corner through those mom and pop stores, provided they come up at a standard that is fixed for the industry. And you can provide safe food so that the customer at the end of the round has, he's trusting, okay, you are providing me safe chicken or safe grapes, pesticide residue is not there. So that trust factor, the way Amul has done, the way Mother Dairy has done in India, is there a thought on that? You can respond later. The challenge that I'm putting on the table is, because I'm still feeling disturbed, just 48 hours from right now, 48 hours back, I was in India's biggest tomato market in Kolar, which is about 80 kilometers out of Bangalore. My team, we were talking to. It's functioning, but if I may say, it's a functioning anarchy. The way it is being handled, the way the whole system is in the grip of a few, commission agents or traders, the wastages, that entire thing needs to be totally revamped. They have 20 acres of land, maybe they need 80 acres of land to have a proper infrastructure. It's bursting all over, spilling all over. Now, what plans you have, because when you go and buy, at present many states will not allow you to buy directly from the farmers. You'll have to rely on these mandis, this is where big. So I think if you can set one commodity value chain right, our Prime Minister calls TOP, tomatoes, onions, potatoes. There is a scheme that has been launched this year. These are 3 perishable commodities. Any contribution that you can make in tomatoes, onions, and potatoes value chains, I think we will salute Walmart on that. So you can respond later. May I request our very prolific and in-depth research-oriented Ritika give us some flavor of the Indian scene, both on the production and the distribution side. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm envious. First of all, I should thank you for inviting me, and I'm very envious of Ashok for having very gently probed a very contentious topic with Fred. And I hope that I'll be able to do some of that also in my presentation later on. So I should say that the theme is very big. Obviously, it's broad, and I'm certainly not qualified to speak on all of those issues. I'm not going to talk about soil health or water and all of those things. What I'll focus on is really some of the things that I think we've learned from India, and just looking at the production and distribution side of things, with a special focus on the role of the government. And that's really the bit that I have some insights, I think, into. So I thought initially I'll talk a little bit about the distribution and procurement side of the story, what has been happening in recent years, especially the past 1 decade or so. And then a few thoughts on what is an appropriate form for the government to intervene in or not intervene in. And then lastly, to just share a few maybe tricky thoughts on what's coming next. And I think these are really issues that need to be flagged, and somebody needs to do more research on and keep on the radar. So this is the bit that I don't want to focus much on, because this is the distribution side of the story where the government intervenes on a large scale. But it's hard to talk about the production and procurement side without talking a little bit on the distribution side, because they're quite, they're integrated in a sense, because if there's procurement, then you need to distribute. You can't just keep stockpiling these things. So the distribution side of the story, the way it works is that there's a public distribution system, and the government has been buying a fair amount of the wheat and rice that comes to the market. I think about 30% of the marketable surplus is bought by the Food Corporation of India, and most of it, not all of it, ends up going to poor, defined variously, poor people across the country. And the record on that hasn't been uniform. And for a long period, actually, it wasn't very good either. But like I said, there has been a lot of action in the past few years, and one of the things that we've seen is that, now it's a very mixed story. Across states, there are a lot of different experiences, and also there is a lot of change. So some of the change, of course, is very welcome. And just to give you a flavor of what has been happening, the public distribution system in India, which provides subsidized grain to poor people, is very well, is famed for corruption and leakages. And indeed, that was the picture. And this is really the worst state in the country. Yeah. So this chart that you see is looking at the leakages in Bihar. And through the 2000s, this chart goes from 2001 to 2011-12, leakages were up to 90%. Yeah, so there was hardly anything reaching people, and then something began to turn around around 2007-8, and there has been some improvement, not nearly enough. That's why I said half full, half empty. There's been some change which gives hope that, okay, maybe it's possible to fix these systems if there is some willingness and you apply the right reforms. And just to back this up, because we were worried that the National Sample Survey, which is a nationally representative survey, may have got it wrong. We were a bit assured because there are a whole bunch of smaller studies which present more or less the same picture, and I'm not going to take you through the slide. Only to say that from 2011 to 2016, there have been a bunch of small surveys in Bihar which corroborate the picture that emerges from the National Sample Survey. And the other thing that's worth also highlighting, also in passing, is that the public distribution system does have some impact on reducing poverty. So I'm giving you two alternatives here. One is amongst the best performing states, where you find that the consumption curve shifts to the right, and therefore the poverty gap is reduced. And in that state, it reduces by 60%. At the all India level, it's about 18% of the poverty gap that is wiped out because of the transfers that poor people receive through the public distribution system. So let me just move on from there to the procurement side. But just one last point before I get there, so the story, really, the bottom line as far as the distribution side is concerned, is that it remains a mixed picture. But the only reason why sometimes we feel it's worth still thinking about this kind of intervention is because it does matter in people's lives, and if you can make it work, it does have a significant impact on reducing poverty. And in recent months, because of certain disruptions, because of the application of Aadhaar, there have been deaths, or starvation or hunger deaths, whatever you want to call them. It just tells you how fragile still some people's lives are, and these programs can play a useful role. Even on the procurement side, there have been very interesting changes, and this relates to this question of sustainable agriculture and farming practices, etc. And as we know from Ashok's work, the Green Revolution and the procurement practices that the Indian government had, of course, it was useful at that point and it played a useful role, but it has also led to problems of sustainability. There was over-concentration in Punjab and Haryana of procurement that stressed agriculture in those states. And what happened around 2004-05 is that the government put in place what is called this decentralized procurement policy, and that has led to two important developments, and just let me show you a little bit. So this chart goes from 1986 to 2014-15, and it shows you the share of the traditional states, which were the old, the states where all of our procurement was concentrated. And you can see for much of this period, it was very high. Yeah, both wheat and rice were being procured mainly from Punjab, Haryana, and Andhra Pradesh is one of the states that I've put in the traditional states category. But post the implementation of this decentralized procurement program or scheme, you do see a significant decline in the concentration in those two states, and states like Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha have started participating in a very big way in the Food Corporation of India and procurements, etc. The other thing, which is also, I think, an encouraging development, is that the All India at the All India level, 6% of farmers are selling to the central government, to the Food Corporation of India. But what you find is that in some states, the participation of to the sales to the government are very high, and in the case of paddy, you can see it's a new state that has entered the picture, which is about 38% of farmers. This is National Sample Survey data, and this is work with Sudha Narayanan and Prankur Gupta. The other interesting development with, that's concurrent with the, I think related to the decentralized procurement scheme, is that in the traditional states, what I call the traditional states, the share of large, medium, and small medium farmers was very high. Yeah, so 62%, and I mean, even in Western UP, it was about 25% of the people who were selling to government were really the big, what I call the big farmers in a certain sense. But in the DCP states, in the decentralized procurement, the states that are participating in that, there you see that it's predominantly the small and marginal farmers that are selling to government. And the reason why I think these developments are possibly encouraging is because farming is stressed in India. And I think it is the small and medium, small and marginal farmers that are stressed who need these forms of support. And to the extent that this DCP is moving the support out of those two and maybe three Western UP kind of area, this is something that will have a positive impact. These are obviously issues that need much more research and thinking, but I thought at least it's worth flagging some of these issues because it also tells us a little bit about what should the government give up on this MSP, PDS policy, or should we explore this a little bit further, and are these developments leading to some good positive outcomes? These are all unanswered questions, and I think that at least in the last few years, there's been a lot of emphasis on cash transfers as an alternative. I'm going to skip this one. Maybe if there's time later on, we can talk about it. Both on the side of distribution, like instead of giving poor people in-kind support through the public distribution system, is it better to give them cash? And on the side of production, instead of giving MSPs, is it better to give some other farm income support? And I feel that these alternatives, especially on the production side, need to be evaluated keeping in mind that there is a change in the procurement side of the story, where it's taking it out to smaller farmers and to new areas across the country. As far as the distribution side is concerned, again, maybe I shouldn't spend so much time on it. There have been small pilots across the country in two areas which are relatively developed, Puducherry and Chandigarh, and then the other two not so much. And actually, they haven't been particularly successful. In one, they've absolutely reversed it back to food. And in the other one, in Puducherry, there has been an announcement already. I'm not sure when and where, whether it will be implemented. So as far as there are some reservations about cash transfers based on experience in the country itself. One is the problem of inflation indexing, whether the government will index these transfers, whether it's income support for farmers or whether it's food money for poor people. The second is market readiness, that, if the state withdraws and cash is pumped in instead of that, The expectation is that a market will develop, and often in the literature, the expectation is that the market which will develop will be a perfectly competitive market. But there's no automatic reason to assume that the market will be competitive. It could be a monopolistic market. It could be the banya or whatever, the local trader who monopolizes and then squeezes out any surplus that might be available to people. And then there are transition and transaction costs that also need to be taken into account. One last thing that's worth saying on the inflation indexing problem is that the Indian experience, at least, as far as cash transfers are concerned, is not encouraging at all. So one very small example is the Social Security pension scheme, where the central government's contribution to it for old age people and widows has remained at 200 rupees since 2006, and there has been no increase at all. Yeah, so now it's basically almost nothing. If you tell someone on a monthly basis you're going to get 200 rupees as a pension, it's really, as we've put it in a recent letter, very ungenerous. So finally, maybe whatever little time I have is to talk about these emerging issues and challenges. So, traditionally, for those who watch these sectors, sorry. Okay, so this is the part where I have to be gentle like Ashok. So, traditionally in this sector, there has been a little bit of a problem, or, as budgets for the social sector have increased, we've noticed that corporations become interested in the sector. And so I just put 2 or 3 examples. One is, I don't know if you've heard of Mr. Ponti Chadda, who was shot dead by his brother. He was the contractor for providing supplementary nutrition for the state of Uttar Pradesh. And basically, it was a very corrupt operation. He used to get free grain from the government and was supposed to grind it into some kind of premix and supply it to these child care centers, the Anganwadis. And of course, there were huge quality issues. And of course, also he managed to maintain his contract even after the government changed from Mayawati to Akhilesh. And then ultimately, of course, he had a fight with his brother, and the brother kind of got rid of him. Another experience in the Indian case has been the Biscuit Manufacturers Association that around 2008 started lobbying with the Ministry of HRD, telling them that the school meal program is really rubbish. It only leads to lizards falling into the food, and therefore it should be scrapped, and you just supply fortified biscuits to children. And, it's not a very practical, I don't know if you want to start having, instead of this lovely food that we are getting, cow sway and whatnot, if you would just be satisfied with the iron and vitamin D and God knows what fortified biscuits every day, even if they have different flavors. But that was the sort of idea. And then again, there's a huge push now, even within the PDS, now that there seems to be that the public distribution system might stay and not be replaced with cash. One of the ways is to try and push for fortification, to give wheat flour and to fortify it with X or Y or the other. And of course, fortification has its advantages, but the experience in India, in the 1 or 2 states that have tried it out, hasn't been very encouraging, because in West Bengal, for instance, the fortified atta that was being supplied had exactly the same problems as Ponti Chadda's premix. It was so bad that people didn't want it. Yeah, so quality control becomes an issue, and then of course it's presented as a scientifically tested. The jury, I think, is still out there on fortification is good, but many other things need to happen simultaneously. So I think those are the kinds of commercial interests that we have always been slightly wary of in this sector. Obviously in other sectors it's perfectly fine. The emerging challenge, I'm just about to finish, is the rise of these, what is now being called philanthrocapitalists. So I have just one slide on that coming up, which is, I guess, also goes as corporate social responsibility, etc. There are different hats that it can wear. So let me just talk about that. So there is a very serious, challenge of policy-making process being dominated or even captured by philanthropists. Yeah, and there are a bunch. I've only pulled out one, but there is something in the Guardian, in the Independent, in the NPR, etc., where they've been documenting with some worry the kind of role that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for instance, has begun to play in policy debates, and it's happening through different channels. It's happening by funding research at universities. It's happening by planting consultants, etc., within ministries of health or agriculture, etc., and also funding NGO research and all of that. And this report, especially the one that the Independent is reporting on, documents all the different ways in which this may be something to think about and be wary of, because it undermines democratic processes. Because who is going to hold it accountable? And I have my own personal experiences. I've been approached to do, in one case, a review paper, and in another case, to evaluate certain projects, and the amount of money that I was being offered to do it. I thought, oh, maybe I should consider this. And in this report, actually, they say that they are trying to silence their critics using their monetary clout. So when I was reading it this morning, I was like, okay, maybe they think of me as a critic, and maybe that's what's going on. Anyway, so I'm just using the example of this one because I think this is perhaps one of the better documented cases. And in India, we have some modicum of democracy, and we can kind of ask questions and all of that. But I think maybe in other countries also, this is a flag that at least people should be aware of. And finally, on PPPs, because this also ties up to the previous session, which is also something that's been discussed in this sector. I think PPPs can work in certain contexts. This is not my area of expertise. But there's one issue that I do want to highlight there, which is also related to this philanthropists or philanthrocapital, whatever you want to call it, is the question of accountability. And we are seeing this with the ILFS case, IL and FS case, and we've seen it in so many different cases. Very often the reaction is to not confront the problem that's facing us, or the accountability problem that's facing us, and to try and duck the issue and talk about the good experiences with PPPs. But I think this has been a serious issue wherever, across sectors, this has been an issue which is worth, before jumping onto that bandwagon, I think it's worth just raising it.
Thank you, Ritika, for a good flavor of India's politics and food system, especially there are one or two questions I will put, and then you can mull over it and respond later. One is the DBT versus the physical, which perhaps Shweta is doing more work on those lines. She can ask questions. My question is bigger, and that is, you talked about wheat and rice. It's a good move that moving from just 2-3 states, decentralized system, so I'm very much appreciative of that, and we have been hammering when as a part of the government that why don't you procure from the eastern belt, because that's where the sustainability issue is. Water is there, and they get 25% lower price than MSP. In fact, I used to say that even in Varanasi Mandal, which is Prime Minister's constituency, paddy prices are often 25% below MSP. If you can fix that, then you can show that the eastern belt, all along eastern belt, prices of paddy would be invariably 20-25% below MSP. And that's where water is. And we are procuring from Punjab, where water table is receding. So very much on that. But the question that I have is the following. One, the government has decided that the government will procure or find some other alternative with this cost, MSP being cost A2 plus FL, for 23 commodities. And today's news, my colleague, if she is here, said the Moong MSP, which is 6,975, almost 7,000 rupees a quintal, market price is hovering at around 4,000 rupees a quintal. Now, if the government wants to be really practical and give the farmers the MSP, literally the entire produce has to be procured by the government. And it's only one commodity. Tuar is same. 30 to 40% market prices are below MSP. Government has gone ahead and introduced a new system of MSP. They can buy, NAFED has bought and then unloaded at 2,000 rupees less, where this loss or so-called food subsidy operation is going to come from. It's our tax money. Now, I want to give a flavor of your wheat and rice today. In this very budget, the food subsidy is 169,000 crores, 169,000 crores. That is only on the surface. There is uncleared bills of Food Corporation of India which were in March when the budget was announced, 1,34,000 crores, literally 300,000 crores of food subsidy. Rice is costing us about 33 rupees a kg to the system, and you want to sell at 3 rupees to 67% of population. Wheat is costing you 22 rupees and you want to sell at 2 rupees. I don't know where it will end. And now, what will happen is you will have to procure all these 23 crops today. The stocks with the Food Corporation of India are 60% above the buffer stock norms. It's a huge, massive inefficiency in the operations of the government in the food security system. And if we are going to increase that tenfold from 2 commodities to 23 commodities, what is going to happen? That is the question on the table. I'm very happy that you brought in the issue of malnutrition a little bit, but also philanthropy, capitalism, and Ponti Chaddas of this world to alleviate malnutrition from this country, or fortified biscuits. I want to share with you, and then the question also to Bustan and you on that question. Today in the morning, I had a wheat paratha of purple wheat. Has anybody tasted purple wheat ever? Has anybody heard of purple wheat? So I'm the guinea pig of a new technology that has already come, and it is not coming from outside. Our own scientist named Monica Garg from Nabi in Mohali has come up with 3 different types of wheat: black, blue, and purple. They are rich in iron, they are rich in zinc, because our soils have become deficient in zinc, and therefore our wheat was zinc deficient, the regular wheat, and that leads to stunting of the children. So zinc rich, iron rich, but most important is antioxidants, 8 times more. So I have become a fan of that. Now, it is coming from research and development, massive research and development of biofortification, not the fortification that you talked about. Now, I feel the 50 years back technology of Green Revolution, yes, there are ill effects, but don't blame the seed. The problem is if you don't price water and don't price power, then your water table is going to recede. So those are the policies. They gave you food security in terms of availability of food. Otherwise, there would have been massive starvation in India during mid-60s. We remember all those days. So the first phase of technology was giving food security in terms of abundant supplies. And now the technologies are coming to make the same staples more nutritious. Biofortification. This is the R&D question. If they can get markets with a special niche market or whatever, or mass markets whether they can be bought. Pearl Millet Harvest Plus has released, which is iron rich in India, all these technologies. So I think you may like to respond at some stage what your view is on biofortification of these for nutrition question, and whether the system of government procurement and distribution in 23 commodities with these MSPs, is that the important one that you consider where it is going to end. Okay, friends, I think we had great speakers and words of wisdom from three. The overall agenda did not restrict to just sustainability in terms of production systems. It stretched, and Bostan made it clear that it's not just producing more in a sustainable manner, but also question of nutrition is important. Question of, you also mentioned social protection farmers, because these are very small holders, may be needed at some stage. What is the best policy in this country? We are talking of doubling farmers' income. Whether it can be done by raising agriculture production or some other means, yet to figure out. So these are the broader issues. Indonesian experience, the Walmart, what it is doing around the world, and hopefully likely to do something in India with partners. And then we have the government and the NGO sector and the philanthropy capitalists entering into the system. So we have different models. The floor is open for discussion. What I would do is suggest, oh, very good, this is exciting. So we will collect first 4 or 5 questions, and then we will see who will respond, and then we will have a next, another 5 one. Yes, please, on this side, Alu Alia, come on. Let me start from here, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a very short question for Fred, which follows on to what you had suggested to him earlier. That Fred, as you must have figured out, you know, this purchase at MSP is a very shallow instrument that is being used by the government. Large swathes of particularly small farmers are left out. Now my question is that with Walmart, deep pockets coming in, the real question is that what are we going to be using the efficiency enhancing effects that Walmart, that will accrue to Walmart for? And here, the suggestion is that would Walmart say that it would buy at the MSP that the government decides all its products from farmers who are not being able to sell to the Food Corporation of India or other such procuring it? Is that a social responsibility that Walmart would be willing to take? Because, you know, if you were to do that, I think there would be chaps lining up at the airport to welcome you in.
I think if I have understood the question, can you buy at MSP, and if load at below MSP, they will go. Yeah, how to use efficiency into the value chain system. That is because our value chains are so, I would say, fragmented. Farmer, typically tomato case, will not get more than 1/4 or 1/3 of what the consumer is paying. And you know, the commissions in between. Now, can you compress that value chain, give a better price to the farmer, and still a lower price to the consumer? The magic wand of value chain efficiency. Yes, please. I'm coming. You're number 3rd on this. We'll have 5. Yeah. We'll do so.
MC Verma. My question is about water use. So, we are talking of sustainability in the context of food security. Now we know that water can be used much less than what has been used. In Punjab, Haryana particularly.
Sure.
Canal irrigation has developed its own problems. We know about this Riley case of using very little water, and what can be done or what is being done to make use of the new technologies for using as little water as possible.
Sure.
Drip irrigation and the rest.
Sure, Gayatri perhaps can give much better stand. There is a lady just behind that, and I'm coming to you, sir. So after this.
Very good afternoon. I'm
Yeah.
Professor Yamini Agarwal from Indian Institute of Finance.
From Indian Institute of
Finance.
Finance, okay.
Yeah, my question is that, usually we do see that the farmers don't get a good price for their produce. And we are concerned about food inflation also at the same time. Now, when the government actually offers an MSP, which is there, it does fix up a particular price. The market price is usually lower. The problems of information asymmetries that are there in terms of those who need the food and those who are supplying the food are not supported by the present institutional systems that are there. And as a result, the farmers are not able to supply their supplies at the right price to the people who need it. And that is why food inflation is rising at some parts of the country, and while a lower rate is available to the farmers at the other cost. My second point is also that for sustainability, it is necessary that there is a huge amount of investment in infrastructure, especially cold storage that is there, and also waste management at the FCI level, which is there. Primarily because a lot of procurement when FCI does not get distributed to the poor, and it gets wasted. So should they be a part, should they also make it a part and parcel of the food processing industry where food can be stored for a longer period of time? Thank you very
maybe
much.
both of you can respond from the government side and from the private sector, zero waste question and Mr. here.
Earlier, one factor which has not been discussed is the hydrological cycle, because that is how we get all the water, starting from the sea, passing over the hills and forests, then coming down to the plains, and we find that by the time it goes into the sea, it is highly polluted and much less. In most of the season, it is much less than what it should be. So these are the factors which have to be kept in mind while considering environment, climate change, and also the production of all the agriculture products. So that is one part which has to be come. Secondly, we have now new technology which has to be integrated. For instance, in the water sector, we have from the surface, we have from the groundwater and precipitation, and at the lowest level, where the marginal farmers are working, which is 85% of all the farmers have a holding of 1 hectare and less. Now the question is how to get them working in a proper way, in an operational manner. And that is where the farmers' connectivities have to be brought in, and some of these are already being done by the private people, but not very much encouraged by the government. That's another way how you can reduce the, that is 30 to 50 hectares, reduce the input cost, and also the wholesale price can go up like the Walmart is trying to do.
Good.
That's another part. The third is the forest people are never involved. They are the ones who are stopping all the groundwater and other factors. And the urbanization and other factors which are again occupying the land. Now we should have a system by which water harvesting is done over the whole of the land of India by various means, whichever is occupying or responsible for that land. That is how we can do all these. Marketing again has to be improved.
I think we have to end because
Thank you.
one person cannot have three. Is the session up to 11:45? Sorry, yeah, 12:45. 5-7 minutes. Okay, we need to collect quickly. That lady is there. Yeah, please go ahead. I think quickly. Please be precise about the question.
My question is for Professor Bustanul Arifin. I am Arpitanand from the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. So as a student of IR, my interest is in understanding where is the lack of consensus in the G20 on which issues? Because these are issues, multilaterally, many things become
Okay.
very, very contentious.
Done. Yes, sir. We'll collect all these hands. You can give this gentleman here. Okay.
I'm Dinesh Sharma. My question is to Mr. Fred. In India, more than 85% of the farmers are small and marginal. How is Walmart going to help those people?
Right.
That's it.
Right. Here, Pati. Here, right.
Thank you. My question is to the chair. My name is Arvind Padi. I come from ICRIER.
Okay.
Yeah. Sir, you in many of your speeches, you talk about the GM cotton, BT cotton story, the success story. Now, from the G20 context, now the European Union, they are talking of banning even the gene-edited crops, not the GM crops. So in the G20 context, what are your prescriptions?
Okay. How many are there? We have to end somewhere. There is a lady on the left, Shweta. I'm coming there. Shweta, go ahead. Quick.
Hi, my name is Shweta and I work with ICRIER, and my question is to Ritika for the reason that I have been following your work for a while. And one thing that puzzles me is when there is a debate between grains versus cash, essentially the approach is to cater to the undernourished population of the country. We need to find a solution which is efficient, financially sustainable, and also has to have an impact. It's never a question, I feel, that it's grain versus cash. I mean, we just have to identify if for every rupee that we're spending, how much we are able to translate to alleviate the issue of undernourishment. Having said this, I am just taking a cue from your own presentation where you presented this one set of states which are large, Punjab, Haryana states, which are large farmers, and they are the ones who've been catering to the procurement system majorly. Now, if I were to just take a cue from there and just ask you a question of what do you think if Punjab farmer would still need grains, or can that state farmer, which is essentially a large farmer according to your own estimate and has access to better markets, if they can be given an option if they wanted grains or cash? Again, the question really is not as if we're substituting it at the onset, but do you think that states which are a little better off, have financial literacy and access to financial institutions, could start to being the state where grains can be substituted?
I think
with
she got
cash?
it. We have 3 last questions and then response. No more hands, please. Yes, next.
I'm Gurinder Dua from Indian Citation Index. My question is on the South-South cooperation in research and development. I was just checking some figures. In the last 5 years, the research being published from Indonesia in Indian journals has increased 5 times. From 500 papers today, almost 2,600 papers in the last 5 years. So is this happening because of some concerted effort on our part, or is it just a kind of a democratic thing which is going on?
Okay, next please. I'm coming. Last one, yours.
Sir, I am Katyal. I was formerly the head of the National Accounts. My question mainly is, as Dr. Gulati has raised, wastages. What is being done for the estimation and reduction of wastages at various levels, farm level, storage level, transportation level, marketing level, wholesaler level, retail level? What is being done in India?
Zero wastage. This is their slogan.
India and Walmart. All the 3,
Yes.
what are they doing?
Okay, last please. And that's the end.
I'm Vijay Kumar Singh. We are representing Bureau of Indian Standards, the national standards body of India. My question is with Professor Bustanul. Sir, with the Indonesian perspective, where do you find that India can be a role model, where Indonesia in any segment in agriculture, where Indonesia can aspire for? And the second most important part, which is the gray area, which is the most critical area which India should address if you look at it from Indonesian perspective.
Good.
My other question is from Madam Ritika. We must congratulate Ma'am academicians to give a terminology to this philanthrocapitalism. The point is, it's nothing new. Whatever buzzword we should say, but this has been the story. And the corporate people or businessman is doing the right thing by, they have to mint money and they're doing it in a strategic way. But how to mitigate this with the point of a state, being in a state, how we should respond to it? What are the areas where we should be more, we need to be strategic for the same?
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. No more questions. And I would now, we have 5-7 minutes as per extended time by Dr. Kithuria. So I'll start from Ritika. 2 minutes, 2 minutes each.
Okay.
You can catch them at lunch.
So I've made quick notes so that it goes faster. As far as this MSP being announced for 23 commodities is concerned, they've been announcing MSPs for many commodities for many years, but actually only procuring wheat and rice, which to some extent I think is a bad policy, because I would much rather that the focus move from wheat and rice to coarse cereals, which is a point I missed in my presentation. So I'm not overly worried that the price has been announced and that the actual government will actually honor its own commitment. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I'm like, okay, it sends some signal, we are serious, but it's not really that serious. So I'm not as alarmist.
How serious it is?
That I don't know. That you know better than me. That is something you know better than me. As far as this question of biofortification is concerned, I don't really have a very clear position on fortification or biofortification for that matter. I think the real answer to the nutrition problem is not wheat or rice. It is actually a diversification of diet. So it's not biofortification, it's not because Indian diets are very poor. There's a lot of data now. I mean, there are huge swathes of India where people, they don't have any animal protein for long periods of time. So I think that is the problem that needs to be tackled, and that's where the answer lies. I'm not against, like I said, biofortification or whatever. I'm saying I'm not anti-science, but I'm also not a person who has blind faith. I will question everything. I have always done it. I will continue to do it. As far as this question of wastages and some of the other things that have been talked about, it occurred to me that cooperatives are something that people should be discussing as well, because it's a model that I think has the potential to be fairer, being scalable. In India, there have been some experiences with the dairy industry, especially where cooperatives have worked, which give a fair price to the producer and a fair price to the buyer. But somehow, again, this is a very unfashionable idea. And obviously, I will be the one who brings it up. And finally, some of the other things, R&D, biotechnology, etc. I think all of those will contribute to fixing these problems. But the problem that needs to be tackled head on is the problem, and to be discussed is climate change and what implications that is going to have. We can't get away from that question. And finally, on this question about a choice-based system, and so we have always been of the view that we need both food and cash. There are certain interventions where food is important, because it's not just about, before nutrition, we are also concerned about food security, that people shouldn't die. And I know that many people think this is maybe alarmist, but actually there is enough evidence that it is not an alarmist problem, that people do die if their pension doesn't come, that 200 rupee pension doesn't come for 2 or 3 months, or the rations are disrupted. As far as choice-based systems are concerned, I think in principle it sounds like an attractive idea, but given what we know about the administrative capacity at the ground level, I don't think it's a very practical solution. Even in states like Punjab, where there are rich farmers who are participating in this, there are many landless people who do need that food support. So even within the state, you'll have to have a choice-based thing, and I don't think many states or any states in the country are equipped to deal with it at the moment.
Thank you. Fred.
All right, so yeah, a lot to cover in a couple minutes. I think I used to be a buyer at Walmart. I bought in hardware and paint, much less contentious issues. But I'm not the buyer anymore. I'm the sustainability guy, so I can't necessarily comment on what we'd be willing to pay for certain goods. But what I would say is I think, yes, the idea is that we would compress that chain and looking at how do you disintermediate, how do you end up bringing efficiencies to the system. Because ideally, what we've seen in other markets is that, yes, the producer actually gets a better price. Sometimes that's through longer-term contracts, that's through transfer of technologies, that's through better processes in terms of how things are brought to market, how we handle them in our own operations. So sometimes it's on our own end of the spectrum, which ties into the food waste. We do have specific goals and targets year over year in addition to this aspirational goal of zero waste. One through the Consumer Goods Forum right now that us and other manufacturers have to have food waste by 2025. So we're well on track on that. But those are all ways that we can contribute to being able to offer a better price for a better item, and then being able to offer that at a fair price to customers on the end of the spectrum. And where we've seen the most success is where we can align supply and demand. When we can align both of those, we find that the market starts to take care of itself. And the other question, there was another question around helping the small and marginal farmers. We do understand that that is the key in NIA in terms of the amount that's produced actually by these very small smallholders. And so we believe that working through the FPOs is probably the best form of doing that. And what we've seen in other markets, the success is being able to do that transfer of technology, being very clear about spec, being very clear again about the relationship that we have. If we can be direct with that farmer, that works usually in our favor, because then they have a very clear signal on what we want, the volumes that we're going to want. We can plan for those quantities. They then know they have that end market, and then they have a very clear line of sight to what is it that the customer wants in terms of our end customer, in terms of whether it's more sustainable attributes, whether it's organic, any of those kind of attributes that are being desired in the market, that can be readily transferred to the farmer, and then we can help them with, again, the technologies and the process to help deliver on that, which then means that, again, you're going to have better alignment between supply and demand. Those are all very high-level concepts, but every market's going to look a little bit different, and the interventions are going to be a little bit different market by market on how you bring that to life.
If I may interject, your mom and pop store question.
Yeah, the mom and pop. No, I wrote down my answers on that one. So I think there's, to me, again, everything's going to look different market by market, but what we've seen hold true is three specific things that I think apply in India. One is that on the philanthropic side of things, our philanthropic arm, by definition, cannot do anything that's self-serving. So they're going to be putting money and dollars into things that are going to benefit all producers, and therefore anybody who's accessing product from those producers, which leads to the second piece, which is at the end of the day, you're going to end up, if you're improving the system, you're going to improve it for anyone who is inputting into that system and anyone who's taking out of that system. And so it's going to, by definition, going to benefit all. So rising tide raises all boats. Okay. And then the third piece to that is that with Flipkart by definition is a marketplace. The idea is that you get as many small producers as possible in there and as many mom and pops in there to provide access to then a broader customer base. And that customer base then has that variety of choice. With them starting to think about food, that is a readily accessible market from that perspective.
Thank you. Musta?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. 5 questions for me, but I cannot answer all, but let me put this way. The issues of water efficiency or hydrology. Yes, I haven't touched directly, but I propose in improving the research and development, we should focus on the crop that have water-saving technology under climate change this time. Second, about the changing of the irrigation system we do have. If we use the traditional way, gravity irrigation, we have to work closely how to empower the water user organization. Maybe it's costly. It's costly. Well, it used to work very well, but this time people thinking about how to pay and so on. But we propose about drip irrigation, which of course require technological change and serious investment for that, including if you want to do all the way to scale to food production centers all over the country in India and Indonesia.